Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I just got back from another adventure out in the wilderness, and I want to share a portion of that with you guys here now. Let's see, about a couple months ago, my cousin was talking about doing a trip together, and I was open to whenever, whatever. It just kind of was like, let's see what can we do. And mainly they had been seeing us go camping often and wanted to join in. So one is a teacher and the other one works at a university. So they have like a very narrow window of when we were going to go. So they selected the week that we would be going. And then I'm not sure. I think we talked about like options of where to go in July, which is hot. They live in Arizona, and we live in Southern California, so it's very hot down here. So we decided to go north, and I said, "What about Mount Shasta?" But I suggested that before the date was picked or the week was picked, and fast forward, my cousin was like, okay, can Richard make sure that he can get that week off before we, request it as well or whatever. So as I was telling Richard the actual dates that I needed him to take off, I was looking at my calendar and saw that my anniversary of awakening was going to fall within those dates. Now, I have two anniversaries that I talk about in my life and that I have in my calendar. So when they come up, I'm always looking for the significance of what's happening in my experience when those dates arrive. Now, I never plan anything in this way, but I am just holding space open to see and like be very present for those days. So as I was looking at the calendar dates to tell Richard, I said, no, I didn't say. I realized that it was my awakening, which to me, my awakening is the first day that I remembered that I'm from, a much different place than this vessel. I remembered energy, and it was the day that I started searching what is energy, and I knew, like, without a doubt that this was where I was drawn towards. So I call that my awakening day. So this day falls within this week of dates that we are going to be going up to Mount Shasta. So I'm like, interesting, because when I had my very first anniversary, so my 1-year anniversary happened again, not by being planned, but was in Mount Shasta. And the actual date was the day that we had a spiritual tour, and that trip 3 years ago now was with my best friend, and we went up to Mount Shasta. Sorry, a plane just came really low. To Mount Shasta, and I didn't even think about it. I had it on I didn't even have it as my anniversary on the calendar back then. But as we were talking to the guide, his name is Garth. He asked me, like, how long have you been on this journey? And I was like, I guess like about a year. And I was like, wait a minute, actually exactly a year. And then I looked at my calendar and it literally was a year. So that's why I knew that's my anniversary date. So as we've moved forward in the years, I'm always like curious of where it's going to fall and what's going to be happening on it. But this year, as I looked at booking this trip, I realized that my 4-year anniversary was going to also be up in Mount Shasta. So I was like, I definitely can see the synchronicities. My 1st-year anniversary was there, and now my 4th-year anniversary will also be there. So as we moved closer to the date, it turned out that my cousin and her husband couldn't come. So, before I say that, we had talked about doing spiritual, at least one spiritual experience while in Mount Shasta, because not only was Richard going to be there, but her husband as well, who they're not on this journey. It's not their life. It's not their passion. It's not their time to open to it. So we had agreed, and even the husbands agreed, that we would do one spiritual experience, which I knew I wanted to do the same tour with the same tour group that I had 3 years ago. So I reached out to them, and it turned out that Garth is no longer working there, but Ashlyn, who's the owner of of the ShastaVortex.com and the actual tour site, she was going to lead us on this tour. So I like start talking to her about the dates. I tell her the week that we're going to be there. She gives me what she has available, and we narrow down to one date. And she asked me to put a deposit. Well, that particular, I shared that information with my cousin, and it turned out like the next day, her husband got promoted, and the training for his promotion was going to happen during that week in Mount Shasta. So they would not be able to come with us. And I knew, like, the moment that I put out the energy to have this, well, look, it started before me. Let's be honest. I didn't pick the dates. So, but when I was cognizant of the dates, and then I reached out to create a ceremonial experience, yeah, everything shifts around you. So I knew when my cousin had to pull away because of her husband's job, I knew, yeah, they're not meant to come. And when you can walk through life with that greater perspective, so you never get like annoyed that people pull out, or Richard still is in this phase of like, he doesn't get that. But as people, like, we make plans and then things don't follow through, like, I'm so grateful because I feel like the space is being cleared for the exact energies that are needed to create whatever healing container that we're going into for that vibration. So when she said that, I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, obviously I know they really wanted to go. It's just that it wasn't the right time. So, Richard and I left on Wednesday evening and drove all day that day, and then drove all day Thursday. So we get up to Mount Shasta on Thursday night. And this is the eve of my anniversary. And Richard, as a traveler, is like someone that loves to do visit national parks. And I told you about that Atlas Obscura site because he likes to find different random things to do in the space. And he's like always wanting to be on the go. So going into Shasta, the only thing that I had booked based on the timing of Ashlyn was the tour. So I knew, like, I'm not going to force him to spend a week here, which is what we were planning to do had my cousin and her husband come. I'm just going to be as open and fluid as I can be because I know that Shasta holds a vibration that makes some people uncomfortable and they can only handle it to a point. So we pull into Shasta on Thursday evening, and the way that Mount Shasta works in terms of camping is the actual mountain is a no commerce zone, meaning that all campsites above a certain elevation, which I think there are 4, are all first come, first serve. And of course, like, you have to, be in the right space, time, frequency to get one of those spots. And so I told Richard, like, let's just drive up the mountain and we'll see. Like, let's see if we're meant to be here and if there's space for us. So we passed the first one and it looked like there was space. And I'm like, let's just keep going because ultimately I wanted to go to the highest elevation, which is called Bunny Flats. And the reason is that in my first tour there, I knew that the energy up in that area is pretty intense. It is, and if you go back to the episode that I did on my first experience in Mount Shasta, I will link it below. But I saw that there is an energy discrepancy in this particular area, even to the point where the trees, normal tree goes up to a point and one branch that is the tallest. Well, the trees in this area, they're split at the top because energy has moved through that and created this like opening into those trees. So I knew that, and I was like, if we can find a space up in Bunny Flats, that would be amazing. So we keep driving. So beautiful. It's magical up there, and the mountain itself still has a lot of snow. So we get up to Bunny Flats, and that, because of all the snow from this year, that's the highest that you can drive this year. So there's a barricade, and so we start looking for a place to camp, and we found the most amazing campsite up there. it fit our van, but then behind it was a trail that opened up into this natural circle of rocks that in the center someone had created a pit for a fire. And right next to that that circle of rocks was a split tree. So I knew, okay, yes, this is where we're supposed to be. I'm going in deep, I tell him. And he's like, okay, go, baby, go. So I just went out and sat for sunset, and I could feel there were different pockets of like, I think I've seen this in cartoons where it's like this ripple that happens in the air, and I could see there were these different pockets of rippling happening all around. I'm surrounded by trees, and I am going to input pictures here so you guys can see, but I could see that there were these ripples happening all around me. And that's when I noticed that, there's not only the tips are split, there's also a tree right next to me that has it's split at the base. So that it has one trunk and then it splits out into two. And I'm like, okay, I know this is where I'm supposed to sit. So I sit myself down and I just tuned in. And what I noticed first was that there are a lot of circles in the area. So not only am I sitting in this natural rock circle, but I look to my left and there's it's an old dry bed creek, but right where I'm sitting, it's where the creek ends, and it kind of has this circular pattern going around this tree in the center. And so I'm noticing that, and like, why are we being called to look at this? And what it felt like is that there is an energy vortex there, and the way that the circle has been made, it feels like if I open myself up to the idea of spaceships, it felt like it's where the concentrated energy of that shape sitting down on the ground would create this pattern. So I'm like, okay. And then I turn even further left and I notice this tree, and I'm really tuning into this tree. And as I look down, I see that there are a circle of rocks, which this looks like people have placed a circle of rocks around this particular tree, from like, imagine the tree being a being in the circle. And I'm like, oh, so I'm like, okay, I see another circle there. And so I noticed then that this is a gathering place. This is we can only see flesh and bones, but if we had circles that could happen in energetics, there were energetic beings held in each one of these circles, around each one. And I was just participating and sitting in on many circles happening in this gathering. And so I got this like knowing that I was supposed to get up and go and walk to that circle that had the tree with the circle around it. And in the way it looked to me where I was sitting was, I have flip-flops on. So I'm like, how am I going to get down there? I don't know. I'm going to wait on that, and we'll see if you pull me in a little bit. and I just like stayed there, just breathing in the air. I think there are fir trees or pines, and it's like, just being hypnotized by that vibration felt just very centering. So I stayed there for quite some time, and then I got up, and then I got up thinking I was just going to walk, across the circle that I was in. And no, my legs carried me down to the circle that I had noticed earlier. And I walk into the center, and I stood there for a minute, and then I felt myself. And by this, I mean, like, it's automatic movements. My mind's not driving the show. I just noticed myself move up putting my spine against the back of that tree and just holding like steady and breathing into receiving this circle of ceremony of energy that was supporting that experience. Now, what I would say is, I looked down and there was a stone, and when I go to different sacred places, and not sometimes even not sacred, wherever I feel a connection, I always ask the earth to show me a stone that wants to be with me, to like hold that vibration. And so this is the stone that came through that evening, and it looked to me like the shape of a dolphin or an eel, and I knew that was the stone that was meant to come with me. So already I could feel like the healing energies of water moving through this place that's full of nature and earth and trees and air. And I knew the water element was also present. So I go back to the van and I just let that be. So then the next morning is my anniversary day, which it happens to be July 14th. And right that day before, Ashlyn had texted me and let me know that she was feeling ill and that one of her other guides was going to be taking us on this journey. And I had booked a 4-hour journey. So, and she said his name is Dan Horton and he'll meet me there tomorrow morning and blah, 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 blah. So we go in the morning and we walk up, and right away I could feel why Dan was meant to be our guide, but just very welcoming. We both pulled cards before, and I knew this was part of the tour because remember, I have been there 3 years ago. So, and I told Richard, just so you know, we're going to be pulling animal spirit cards, and I just want you to know, like, that's what's coming your way. And he's like, okay. So we go outside and sit at a picnic table, and Richard had pulled the turkey and I had pulled the antelope. Actually, I didn't pull the antelope. The antelope jumped out of the deck. And I actually have the deck that we pulled the cards from, which is the medicine cards, the discovery of the power through the ways of the animals. And I had, when I was at this same tour 3 years ago, they used this deck, and I bought this oracle deck back then. So yes, Richard pulled the turkey and I pulled the antelope. And Dan says, let's sit down, and I want to tune into the energy of both the turkey and the antelope to give you guys an idea of what we're working with today. And me, I'm all about this, and I'm so all for it. So we first went into the turkey energy, which was called the giveaway. And Dan, being a divine masculine presence, able to express these animal spirits on such a high vibrational plane. What I noticed in that moment was Richard raised his energy to the occasion. So the turkey is called the giveaway, and Dan read the passage in the book which basically says that the turkey's energy is all about giving away for the love of the give. Meaning, like, you sacrifice your own life for the betterment of others, or the, let me tune into what it feels like, the expansion of another. And he said, this is your energy. And I started crying because that is Richard's energy. And, I explained to them why I was crying. I just said, Richard is completely selfless in a lot of ways. I mean, he's still human, but not only is he supporting me to share myself in this way, but also, as you guys know, my mom is currently staying with us, and he's just this type of person that when he sees someone in need of his support, gives unconditionally. And so to me, him pulling the turkey was no coincidence. And then we talked about my card, which was the antelope, which I had never experienced this card before, but basically was the gist of it was that I'm here to connect with higher spirits and bring that energy through to humanity. And, Dan doesn't know anything about me at this point, but also it talks about action and that I'm here to, now is the time. Like, I have to pull the trigger. Now is the time to move forward. And yeah, so then I explained like my actual story and where I am on my journey. And, the two cards themselves were very important and also very telling of where each of us is in our current expression or contract. And that I needed that push to take action, because it's almost like I've been like, you guys know, like I think I'm ready and then I pull back and I'm not ready. And the card was very much about taking action. So we get into Dan's truck, and the first place we go is to the Shasta spring waters. And locally I drink the Carlsbad alkaline water, which comes from a spring. But in nature, where it actually has a spring bubbling forward, and you can take your water bottles and jugs and go to the spring and collect this sacred water, I knew this was coming, because this is like the purification of opening up the circle and the ceremony for the day. So we went there and collected water, and I remembered that the water tasted very sweet to me and very like, I don't even know, pure, but in the sweetest way. And so we each had some water, and then Dan took us. There's a bridge that crosses this natural spring, but back behind there's trails, and we had kind of connected on some dragon energy, because I had told him how Richard built this van for us, and without knowing, where I sleep, the walls on where our bed is covered in honeycomb patterns, and there's no way that he would know this, because I don't go this deep with him. But to me, the honeycomb, when I see it, and I only knew this from when I met Zanita, she told me to start tuning into the walls around me, because I would see honeycomb. And one day it just bounced out at me, and it's like this gold color, and they're not very big. They're like if you put your pointer finger and your thumb together, they're about that size, and like, thousands of them around this room, but not only this room, the whole house. So that pattern to me has been very influential, and obviously not surprising, because I would say the bees were already calling me from way before I consciously knew them. But so Richard created this van that has these honeycombs, and what I know of the honeycombs is that actually they carry the vibration of the bees, but if you go into higher dimensions, what it actually is the scales of the dragon energy. So I had told Dan about how Richard knows things, but he doesn't consciously know why he's doing this. I'm a grid worker, and he knows where I'm supposed to go, so I just follow his lead. And it's every time, like, I get to a place and it's right. And then I explained how this particular day that we're sitting here is my 4th year anniversary, and I did not plan it. I let everything else kind of orchestrate itself around me to create this opening. And so I was telling him, like, Richard knows without knowing. So as we go to this bridge and cross the stream, he's like, I'm going to bring you to a place that holds a lot of dragon energy. And I'm like, okay. So we go, and it's this beautiful, right up against the river. So you hear water moving by, and there's these 2 trees. And he says one of them holds the masculine embodiment, and the other one the feminine. And as they grew, their bases are grown together. And there's almost like a platform between them based on their trunks that you can step up on and walk on. And then they grow separately in this little carved out oasis on the stream. So we sit down. Well, first he tells us, okay, I want you guys, he the whole time he's very conscious of Richard not being consciously in what we're doing, right? So he keeps talking to Richard and talking about science, and he starts by talking about the importance of water and how, he gives them a book to read, which it turns out I actually have the book, which is called The Hidden Energy of Water, I believe. And he's trying to make his mind at ease. And I'm noticing this and kind of being consciously aware of it, but letting him take the lead as the masculine. And he says, the waters are the purifier of us. They actually are us, and they hold so many memories. And the first sip that Richard took of that water, it brought a memory to him of him and his grandmother foraging for mushrooms, and there was a natural spring near where he lived in Slovakia. And the first sip he took, he remembered that and brought that forward. So Dan's explaining to him like the importance of water, and then I said, I don't remember telling him this when we started purchasing, the 5-gallon Mountain Valley waters back at the beginning of COVID. I don't remember telling him why we needed that water, but then I felt like the opening that I could go deeper with him. And I explained, like, this is why we want natural water in our house. This is why the water is alive, and it carries messages that if we open the door to them, we can receive. So for like 3 years, we ordered that Mountain Valley spring water, but then our delivery system changed and we moved. So then we switched to the Carlsbad alkaline spring water that comes up in this area. So I explained that's why I purchased those. And he's like, oh, really? He didn't know, but I don't think he could have known back then. I just, like you have to like slide these things in your everyday life, and then when the person's ready to open up to the wisdom, you can share it. So then he was like, oh, okay. And he's like grasping what Dan's laying down. And then he goes, I want you guys to, and he goes, Richard, just try to go with it. It may feel like it's way too much, but just try to humor us. That's how he put it. He's like, I want us to commune with these trees. And then which I was so grateful for, he explained the way that he does it. And he puts his face right up into the tree trunk, and he's like, I want you to breathe in the tree. And we're like, okay. He goes, you're going to do an out breath through your mouth. And as you inhale through the nose, breathe in that tree. And I want you to do that for as long as intuitively feels right, but around 5 breaths. You're trying to connect your infinity with their infinity loop and create this symbiotic relationship. So he goes, I want you guys to get up and go and tune into whichever tree you feel is being called to you. So I automatically go to the feminine. Richard goes to the masculine. And I looked over at Richard, and he put his arms around that tree and just went into it, like full on. Like he let go of the ego and really took this moment to like listen to Dan and be open to a totally straight man that's like masculine into hiking, and like let him guide him in a divinely feminine way to something that Richard needed. And I, for my part, was just present and holding space for that. So I went into my own experience with the feminine tree. And then after a while, Richard came over to the feminine tree and communed with her. And I went to the masculine. And then Dan asked if we could sit down and do a guided meditation. And Richard was like, yeah, okay, I'm open to it. Okay. And then he says to Richard, did you notice that when we first got here, I took off my flip-flops and Gabrielle took off her shoes and socks? And Richard's like, yeah. And he's like, the reason is because we want to ground here. And then he went into explaining what grounding was through his perspective, and we want to feel the earth. So then Richard, I see him taking off his shoes and socks before the meditation. And Dan led us through a guided meditation that I think helped Richard let go of, a lot of the times people that are just like not there to fully go into a silencing of the mind. The guided meditation is like the lulling journey to let go of your ego. And I mean, obviously I was in my own experience, but Richard was in his own experience, and we went there. Like this, our tour guide for this day was able to hold my vibration and Richard's vibration, and at the same time contribute his energy to that, being the bridge of welcoming Richard into a new experience. And before actually we sat down there, he kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, because Richard's just, opening up to this experience, I don't want to go too deep. And so I was thinking that we won't go into Telos, which is the energy of the mountain and the people that are living in the mountain. And I would say people is a very loose term. They're higher dimensional expressions, I would call them, which our ego can associate as people if you are lucky enough to have the visuals to see them. But I was like, yeah, you're definitely right. Like, and he said, do you think a guided meditation will help? I'm like, definitely. And so we had agreed that we were going to just keep it very light for Richard. So after this meditation, Dan's like, okay, I think we're going to go up on the mountain and I'm going to show you guys some spots and we'll take it from there. As we're driving up the mountain, he's like, okay, I'm definitely getting some guidance that you guys are open and ready to receive the mountain. And I'm like, yeah, like I wonder, and I'm thinking, I wonder if he's going to take us to the same places that Garth brought us to 3 years ago. But he makes a left turn, which I had not turned into any of these lefts, like dirt driveways before as I was going up the mountain. So I know we're going to a new space, and it's like dirt, and I mean, you need a 4-wheeler to even get, or 4x4 to even get back to where he brings us. Okay. And it's not very far from the main road, but maybe like 3 or 4 minutes, but it's like rough terrain. So we get there and I'm like, okay, I know something's happening here and I can feel it, and all the while I had brought in my water jug. So I'm sipping and communing with the energy of the water as well. And we stop, he parks, and he's like, this is pretty fascinating because I've never been here when there is no one else here. And I'm like, really? And he goes, oh yeah, this is a very sacred place, and it's hidden by, purpose, but there's always someone here holding space. But he's like, I'm feeling like I didn't think you guys were ready for this, but I got a very clear message that there was healing here. So he goes, I want you guys to explore. And as I look out the window, there's this tree, these kind of clusters of trees, and I can see what would look like from the parking lot, it would look like dirt, like kind of whirling up, but it's nowhere near the parking lot. So it looked like this kind of dust going in a cyclone. And I said, what's over there? And he goes, that's one of the portals. And there's another one over here. And I want you to, first, I'm going to have you just open up your intuition and just walk around and feel into where you feel called to be. And then we'll get back together in 10 minutes and we'll talk about where we're going to, what portal we're going to go into. So I knew right away where the first one was because I could feel it. And he also said that's the Celtic portal. That's the only thing I knew of that portal. So I'm like, okay. So right away, I know because I saw it. That's the portal that we're meant to do work with. But I don't say that. So right when we get out of the car, I walk to the other side, and the other side there's a pentagram on the ground, or a star, a 5-pointed star, and right away for me, I knew this wasn't the energy that I was choosing, but it felt like the key to open up the other portal. So I walked, it's kind of like these trees are around, and obviously in all of these stories, you're going to notice there's not pictures. I took this time, this 4 hours with Dan is very sacred, and Richard too, so we didn't take any photos during this time. So I walk through these kind of canopy trees on this path, and right in front of me is a big tree with stone circle around it. And I knew, again, it's a circle for the gathering. So I go and I sit down in the circle, take my spot, and I look at the tree, and there are staves, 3 staves going at the base of the tree. And I said, okay. So I sit down in my position in the circle, and I just, I was like, I know that I'm supposed to work with the other portal, but I wanted to tune into you and to just give gratitude. And obviously I'm feeling this, I'm not saying this, but I can feel my heart expanding and opening up to the Telos people and the energy that they hold so sacred. And oh, I forgot to mention, this was the biggest, my download during the meditation at the creek was, this is the heart chakra of the planet. And I consciously knew that, but I didn't know what that meant until I felt it, which every chakra of the planet, and they're placed throughout the whole world, is holding a certain vibration. Well, Shasta holds the root. And what that means is that it is the clearest point of entry to the root or core of the earth, which means that you can collect your ancient knowledge that the earth holds for you. So imagine, like, if you've listened to that episode where I talked about burying a crystal and amplifying your energy through that crystal, the root chakra of the planet is like the apex of that grounding rod. Okay. So that's what I got in my meditation. And I was like, and I'm so grateful to be ready to receive the earth in this way, because I could see that there was training that happened to get me there. So first it was Joshua Tree, then it was Colorado and the Rockies and the stone people. And then it felt like it was like this kind of, like if you think about, you're using the spiral in a counterclockwise to go up, you're also using that spiral in a clockwise motion to go down, and you have to go down through the layers of the elementals to receive the root. So when I was in Shasta 3 years ago, I wasn't ready to receive that full anchor. So this is what came through in my meditation. And now that I think about it, that's probably why he was like, okay, she's already opened up that portal to the core. Let's see, maybe if we drive up the mountain, they'll call her towards the two portals that he brought us to. So as I'm sitting there in this stone circle with the tree in front of me, I'm allowing the gratitude of my rooting in Shasta to kind of flower open. And again, that's through emotion, that's through feeling. And my experience, when you want to work with elemental beings or other beings, if you're having the conversation in your mind with them, it's harder to receive them back because they don't speak that way. If you open up your heart and you allow the gratitude and acknowledgement for the sacredness of this exact moment, time, space, reality, that's how they can communicate back to you and fill you up. So what came back to me was, you're one of us. Like, we are in a circle. Like, none of us are separate from, like, we label as people the Telos people, right? Like, those are the people that hold the mountain energy. But in the big span of things, we are all one. So the reason that they wanted me to sit in the circle both the night before and this night or this day was to acknowledge that I am part of the circle. And then it was, we're holding the vibration, but your healing is in the other portal. You'll have a lot of healing in the other portal. So I'm like, okay. And as I got that message, I look up and Richard's standing there to the side. And so I showed him the circle and I explained what I was doing and what I got. So we start walking back to the middle point. And I tell Dan, I know our healing's over there. The message I got here was that, yes, this was the portal for the mountain, but that there's something else over in the other portal, which I hadn't walked over to feel the energy yet to work with. And he was like, okay, yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, yeah, he's like, yeah, that is those are the Telos portal over there. And this is the Celtic one over here. And so he's told Richard and I to first go and explore it ourselves, because his explanation to this was, when you open up and your mind's not like waiting for the guide to say, this is where the portal is. He's wanting to see, can we find it? So immediately I knew where it was. I walked into the center of the trees. So again, this portal is a circle of trees. And I like just breathed into it, and Richard kind of followed, and then we both did the breath communing with each of the trees. And after that, Dan came over. We all took our shoes off again, And he's like, okay, I want you, and he says again, like, Richard, this may kind of be crazy to you, but just try to go with it. Even if you're like, what the hell am I doing? Just allow it to just flow. And we're going to do a healing here. And I want you to just be open to the guided meditations that I'm going to bring us, or the guided information I'm going to bring us. So we stand kind of in a 3-point circle in the middle of this circle of canopies of trees. And he explains how he's going to have like this mantra that he's going to say. And as he calls in the sun, we're going to hold our hands up to the sky and pull in the energy of the sun. And then we're going to move it through our vessel and collect. He's going to go bring us through each chakra. And as we move to that chakra, we're going to gather the energy that no longer serves us. And then we're going to give it to the mountain. Like he's like, you're going to go to the mountain. So we do this, 7 times for each chakra. And at the end, he's like, we're going to bring in one last breath, and you're going to put the intention of what you feel called to ask the mountain for in that exhale and that release out. And we each went through that process. And what I felt in my own body was there was a lot of like, I guess I would say energetic cords to lower frequencies that I was holding in each chakra. And cords isn't the right word. I would call them threads. They felt like these kind of residual tentacles that were still playing around in my root and my sacral mainly. And as I released that, I just felt like this sense of like nurturing and peace come over me. And Dan asked Richard if he would share what happened, and Richard was like, I don't feel comfortable right now. And so Dan's like, that's okay. But on the way home, we were listening to a book, I think, and he turned off the radio and he goes, do you want to know what happened to me in that circle? And I was like, yeah. So he's like, I got 2 messages, and I've never had this before. I've never gotten something that I wasn't thinking about, and then I got like deduced to a situation where I got something. He's like, they just dropped in out of nowhere. So I know like that's probably what you would call a download. And I was like, okay. And he's like, the first, what I got is that I'm here to be the give for you. And that I have been thinking that because we started as equal partners, that's where we were supposed to be. And all of a sudden this knowing came over me that I need to look at this, that you're doing something that not many people in this world can do, and that I need to be the supporter of that, regardless, without the expectation that you're going to eventually be a financial partner again. And I've never felt that. I didn't know how to release that feeling that I had that we started as partners, therefore we should be partners. And I feel at peace with that knowing, and whatever is meant to come financially through you through this work is what's meant to be. But I think I'm being called to just be the give, which again came back to the turkey. And then he said in the second message was that I have overextended myself, and that if I keep working the way that I'm working, I will give myself a heart attack. So that something like that, he needs to slow down and also pare back on the externals. Now, he mentioned the house, for example. He's like, I feel like it was an emotional purchase, and I had in the back of my mind that eventually, we would both be contributing to it, and it's such a big mortgage payment just for me, and I work crazy because I think how am I going to ever pay this off? And he had been like working himself up about it. And he's like, I don't know if the message was like, if we're meant to move, we'll be shown where we're meant to move. And I said, did you get any messages about where we're supposed to move if we're supposed to leave this land? And he's like, no, but they just said that it's not worth me stressing about to the point of exhaustion. And I was like, that makes sense to me. You work like crazy. And I would say he works more than's needed. Now, Richard as a personality also has these other hobbies that he's really into, collecting vintage motorcycles and a vintage truck, and these are not cheap hobbies. So there are some perspectives I think that are working through in his experience right now that he has to go through. And even if I on my end can see, like, it's not the house that's too expensive, it's the hobbies, and I get it, you want to have hobbies, but it's like he doesn't just stop. Like, for example, in our Sprinter van, it's not just the ramshackled thing. No, he spent the top of the line dollars on every piece of that van. And it's not that it's not appreciated, but he hasn't gotten to the place in his hobbies to realize that it's not needed. It's not the thing that's going to make us happy. And I would say that goes too for his bikes, his motorcycles, and all the things. But I can't shortchange the journey. Even if in the past I've made comments to that point, he doesn't get it yet. So I feel like the second message was like him starting to look at that in a bigger way, bigger than he has before. So back to the tour. So after in every place that we were, Dan would say, do you guys feel complete here? Do you have any more? Do you want to walk around more? Like, what do you feel called to do? And we both felt complete there. So he brought us he said, there's one more place I want to bring you that's called the Ascension Rock. And it's a very, again, sacred spot. You'll definitely probably see people meditating around this spot and holding the frequency. And you have to actually climb up, do a little rock climbing to get to the top of this rock. And so we're both like, okay, that sounds great. So we get up there, we get to the path, and then we start walking, and we eventually climb the rock, and we get up there. And you're sitting on this rock, and in front of you is Mount Shasta. And Richard was on my left, and Dan was kind of behind us. And what I noticed right away is this huge, and I'm talking huge, white butterfly going around us in a counterclockwise motion, like circling Richard and I over and over again. There is a rebirth happening here, and I'm very conscious of the cycle of what's moving through and holding space for what has happened. And even though Richard hadn't given me his downloads at that point, I knew he was really taking this seriously, and not from the mind. Everything that Dan asked us to do or to participate in, Richard was present for. So I knew that something had shifted. And then Dan says, I'm being asked to tell you that you're supposed to guide us through whatever wants to come through you. He's speaking to me. And I knew it. The moment he started speaking, I knew he was going to say this. And personality-wise, especially with Richard there, who I know I can get way off, into another dimension, and he's like, wait, what? So Dan said, I am getting a strong indication that you're supposed to speak to us. And so I don't know what I said, but I looked at Richard, and he was like looking at me like, okay, like I'm waiting. And I just let go, and I let whatever was meant to come through my voice. It wasn't a meditation. It was more like me speaking. I wasn't really speaking. I just talked to them first. I talked to them about allowing that butterfly was showing us that our bodies are needing to move into a circular pattern, which is counterclockwise. So I said, if you feel called, just allow your body to take on that vibration and move with it. It just will make you feel more at ease. It's almost like it opens the door to the body to let go. And from there, I don't even know what I said, but I was just talking about this experience of why we were here, and that the mountain was supporting us, and that even the bird or the butterfly was here to support what was happening, and just like sharing this gratitude. And I don't even know what else. I don't, honestly, I have no memory yet, hopefully, of this experience. And then after I did that, then Dan asked us to put forth an intention. And weirdly, again, I did not consciously pick my intention. But what came through me was this asking for the support to not hold judgment to every person in the circle. Every person's seat in the circle is exactly where it's supposed to be. And can I just hold space for that position? Now, what had been coming up for me over that day, the coming days, was something very personal with a person in my family. And I think that my asking or my intention for that moment was to have support as I moved through this experience with my family member, and being able to support not only myself, but those in the circle as this experience unfolded. And so, yeah, I didn't consciously know that was an intention that was needed, but then fast forward a few days, it definitely was. So, what I will say, the tour ends and it was a beautiful experience. I would a zillion % recommend Dan. He held a divine masculine perspective the entire time, and he's a wizard, and he is a deeply emotional being that had such reverence for what Richard and I were moving through the land, through the practices that he taught us, through just everything. And when we called it an end, I had said to Richard that I wanted to go up to Castle Lake and go into the water. And so he and we went and got lunch, and then we went up to the lake, and he said, right as we got out of the van, he was like, he had put on his bathing suit and stuff, but we got to the water, and he said, I'm going to go in only to my feet. I'm not going to go swimming. So I was like, okay. And that's where I realized he had been open and held this open space for 4 hours, and I could feel the walls kind of closing back down. And, I knew consciously that I had to allow it, because I knew he moved through something. Even though we hadn't talked about it yet, I had to let him pull back. And so we went into the lake and just kind of stayed like only knees deep. And the water was absolutely freezing. But then he wanted to leave. He wanted to leave Shasta. And I knew, before I left on that trip, I had one of the books I was called to open up and look at. It's called Spiritual Places, and we got it as a wedding gift. And in that book, the only one in North America that's listed is called Crater Lake, and it's in Oregon. So I had said to Richard, as we started driving up to Mount Shasta, I opened that book that we got for the wedding, and the only place in North America is Crater Lake. And so he was like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do on this trip too. So after he left Castle Lake and Shasta, and he was like, we're going to Crater Lake next. And I was like, okay. And I had to let go that my idea of being in Shasta would be to be there the full time and just be with the land. And Richard is like this kind of honing device, and he's like, nope, we're complete here. We did what we came to do, and now we're on to the next adventure. And I definitely held a little bit of sadness as we left town, because we literally only had 24 hours in Shasta. But I knew, okay, remember, he's the guide. And if you can follow that, he knows where we're next needed to be. And you were told before you even left that Crater Lake is the spiritual place to experience. And none of this happens by coincidence. So I had to let go of Shasta fairly quickly, and it kind of felt like ripping off a Band-Aid. But I know that trip was for Richard's opening. And if he was complete, I had to pull back my energy and let it be complete. So I had just an amazing experience, but I also realized that it wasn't just for me this time. And I also realized that the reason my cousin and her husband pulled away, their energy pulled away, is that Richard needed the let go in his experience, and he felt completely supported by Dan and I to do that. And I think if there were more people in this situation, especially someone opening up to nature, it's not easy to go throw your arms around a tree and just love it. But what I noticed moving forward in the next days of our trip is that he would go and do the breath with each tree that he felt called to, and he would touch the leaves of things, and he even put his arms around another tree when we were in the redwoods. And it opened up something in him that had never been there before. And I believe it was a connection to his root and remembering that this is stuff we've done before. Your grandmother showed you as a child, and funnily enough, he's now feeling like, should we move up there? He feels this strong call now to Northern California and to these trees and these, lands that hold such a different vibration than Southern California. Now, I don't know where this is going. He has already started looking for practices up there. I have to hold for whatever is meant to be. But I also know that we're still making plans here and moving forward with what we have planned here. So I don't know what's to come, but I know that I'm not meant to know right now, and I'm meant to feel into every day as it comes. And I just want you guys to know, like, as you are incorporating the energies in your life to be more open and to be of higher frequency, you have to let it unfold in the natural course that it is. Like, it's 4 years into my journey, and Richard's been like little by little accepting of me. Obviously, he's my biggest supporter, but in his own journey, the opening happened in Shasta. And I just am so grateful for the experience. And again, if you guys can get there anytime soon, there's some great vibrations moving through there. And it felt like so deeply grounding, but also cosmic in a way too, because you have the bridge. So as I told Dan what I was getting from my downloads from the meditation, he said that the Telos people, which I don't know anything about other than they're the people from Mu, that there's a portion of Mu that was able to move into this volcano. He said that they're the bridge between the cosmic, the heaven, the angelic realms, and the core of the earth. And they're literally, them being in that volcano is the bridge. So to experience this bridge, it's like, oh, it feels like it feels like the vessel, but the vessel blown full open, because you're deeply rooted and you're deeply connected to the higher astrals, the higher realms, and you are holding it all in the body. So it's such a beautiful vibration, and I cannot recommend it enough. I know that it was happening for a specific call and reason. And I want to say this to you guys too. Sometimes that full blown bloom won't happen in my body until a few weeks from now, a month from now, because the way that these downloads or experiences are experienced is there's only a portion of your consciousness that can be present for it. Like in Richard's case, he opened up for that 4 hours and then he had to close back down because it was at his max. For me, I'm able to pick up on more of the nuances and be present for and conscious while they're happening. But there are codes that are shared in these sacred experiences that my vessel isn't capable of deciphering at this time space. So as I move forward in the next days and weeks, I will get more information about why I was there. So I want to tell you guys this because this is what grid working is. This is being with the land and being called to where you're moving and meant to move to. Maybe not for your opening, but for your closest partner's opening. Yes. So I am so grateful for this experience, and thank you so much for being on this journey with me.